Hey guys, it's your host, Bailey Cartwright. Welcome to the Stronger Scars podcast, where I invite others to dive deep into the ups and downs of physical and mental scars. Hello everyone, welcome back to this week's episode. I am joined with Gwen, Schemm, and we played ODP together. We were just chatting about we barely remember our times as children youth soccer, but we did play ODP together a long time ago. And she is a Frostburg State University soccer alum. She has a bunch of, awesome accolades. Like she was the editor in the university's paper, team captain, the university's first academic All-American, correct?
Yep, in Division II competition.
That's awesome. And after college, she went on and did a year doing the AmeriCorps service year. And now she's working as a digital marketing specialist. But my favorite thing about her is how much of an advocate you are for mental health. There's not enough of that in today's world. But just go ahead, say hello to everyone, introduce yourself if I missed something.
Yeah, no, hi everybody. My name is Gwen. Thank you for your kind introduction. I am super excited to be here. Yeah, I mental health is something that's super close to me, and I'm just fortunate that I've been able to take on a role where I can advocate in support of other student athletes.
Awesome. So I think I want to start. I know, I've been just kind of like looking at your social media. I know you have a blog I want to talk about later on, but just kind of take us back, to freshman year, let's say, of college. I want to just kind of talk. I think it's important for people to hear from, the own voice of someone who went through something of what they struggle with. So like just kind of walk us back, what it was like, what went on for you, the whole shebang. Let's just walk
Uh,
through it.
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated from high school in June of 2016, and I remember practicing every day that summer, getting ready to go play college soccer, which was a dream of mine since I was a little kid. It was always a dream to play at the next level, and I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity to play at a school that was like the perfect distance from home, 2 hours. So I could go home if I needed. My parents could come support me at games. It was kind of the best of both worlds. But I remember practicing every day, whether it was just like ball skills, foot skills, or running. I have never ran the fastest mile ever. So I remember being super stressed out about that. But I got to preseason. I was super excited, super nervous, like typical freshman jitters. But I was not playing like myself on the field at all. I felt like I had lost who I was as a player. The creativity that I typically played with was something I was no longer confident in. It was not getting a lot of minutes, which was understandable because I was not playing very well. So I was not an asset to the team at the time. I remember we played against York, and that was kind of a turning point for me. I remember doing a scissors around an opponent and getting a shot off, and I was like, okay, she's kind of back. But it still was something that brought great stress. I would have panic attacks before and after practice just because I knew that I was not playing like myself. I was worried I was letting the team down, my parents down. Failure has always been a great fear of mine, failure and disappointment. And I felt like I was doing that just for my loved ones, for my coach that had given me this opportunity, and all of the above. And I remember struggling very much with that and then not knowing why I was feeling that way. There was panic attacks, nightmares, just great anxiety. Um, and I just was a perfectionist. I was struggling with that on the field because I wasn't playing like perfect, not that you can play perfectly. And then off the field, I was an even bigger perfectionist where I would stress over exams, assignments, presentations, all of the above. And a turning point for me was my freshman year, fall semester, my first finals week. I was stressed out to the point that I turned to more self destructive behaviors um, because I didn't know how to cope with all the turmoil that was going on. I was nowhere in danger of getting a B in a class. Oh, like I think my lowest grade was like a 94, so I could have essentially failed my finals and still got A's, but for whatever reason, that was something that I couldn't rationalize. So that was a huge turning point for me. And then I didn't really tell anybody what was going on because I couldn't rationalize it. So how was I supposed to expect somebody else to? But I put myself in therapy the next semester because I wanted to make sense of what was going on and have been in therapy ever since. So I'm a huge advocate for that. It took me a while to accept that needing help was okay. But it has changed my life for the better.
So I'm kind of curious, like when you say like more like self-harming, do you think that that's something a lot of athletes struggle with?
I think more than we realize. I think it's something that's not talked about. And often when I talk about my mental health experiences, it's the part that I leave out for the most part because I'm still working on not being ashamed of kind of coping that way because I know you're not like it's not healthy and it could be rather dangerous and all of the above. But I want that to be more of the conversation or like part of the conversation just because it's something that is important. And I do think, I don't know for a fact, but I do think it's something that is dealt with by student athletes and we don't really talk about it enough.
That's what, because I feel like I've seen firsthand people who, kind of go down that path, and like you said, like, they will openly talk about their mental health, but that is the one part they leave out because I think that physical appearance of something, like a physical mark of the struggle, just really kind of wears down on people.
No, it for sure does, and I know that's something that, like, I still struggle with, just on behalf of body image in itself, that it's like, the scars, and I mean, I had foot surgery, I think my senior year, just because I had broken my foot and had bunions and, like, all of the above, so we had to fix that, but that's a scar that's more, like, I don't wanna say, like, I'm proud of it, but it's like, "Okay, that's finally fixed," and then in comparison, there's other scars that it's just like, okay, that's something I'm more ashamed of that represents my internal struggles, that it was just a low point. Um, so it's some like it I can't figure out how to necessarily cope with that quite yet because it just is so symbolic of something that I quite frankly don't want to remember.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very crucial point. Like, I mean, obviously stronger scars, like I am all about embracing scars. And like you said, like scars from a surgery we look at as strength. Like I overcame it, like I'm coming back. And I think the only way to break the stigma of scars from something such as self-harm is to talk about it. And like I said, like I don't think it's talked about enough. I know, people who I've played soccer with who have told me that they self-harm, you can tell that they're covering it. It's not something they want everyone to see. They don't want coaches to see because then that's going to reflect how, maybe their playing time is affected or the coach thinks that they're capable of doing things. So it's something that we need to talk about and we need to have people bringing awareness to. But there's so much like consequences that may be surrounding that people just choose to not.
No, exactly. And I know that was something it took me I think because my freshman year, I wasn't open about anything. It was more something I kept internal. And my sophomore year, it was something that I was still kind of coping with and making sense of in my own world. But my junior year, I had an amazing assistant coach that I kind of confided in and was just like, here's what's going on. Soccer has been a huge stressor. I want to perform well on the field. I want to make sure that I'm making my teammates proud, that I'm competing at the highest level, but I may need help along the way. And she was incredible. I had an incredible assistant coach or two assistant coaches, both my junior and they were all incredible, but I just allowed them to help my junior and senior year. And then my athletic trainer was someone that I like her office was such a safe space. Um, I could go in on a good day and kind of be elated about whatever was going on, or on a bad day, she was there to kind of pick me up as like we were crying or whatever was going on. Um, But letting people in was kind of the best decision I ever made, especially on the field, because I could come off and be all worked up that I wasn't performing well on that given day. And they could kind of be that reassurance. It's like, okay, yes, you made a bad pass here, or yes, you did this, but what are some things that are in your control? What are your strengths today? And how can we kind of tap into that so you can perform well for the team and be someone we want out on the field?
Right. And I always say, like, and I will go to my grave with this, like, you have to be your own advocate. You have to be your best own advocate. But at the same time, like, you're only as strong as the people you surround yourself with. If you're not surrounding yourself with people who believe in you, people who will be there for you and advocate for you just as much as you're advocating for yourself, like, then you're not going to be as successful as you could be if you are surrounded with those people who care about you and want to help you achieve what you want to achieve.
No, definitely. And that was something that I wish I would have done earlier, was
Mhm.
to just let somebody in, whether that be my parents or my brother or my best friends, where but it was something I struggled with so immensely and really was like, I don't know what's going on and I don't know why I'm feeling this way. So how, like, I don't even know how to put it into words to make it make sense to somebody else. But it was truly letting people in that made soccer a safe space again, where it was something that I knew if I was feeling sad or had just an anxious day, that it was somewhere I could go and felt and be supported by. And I mean, my best friends played soccer with me at school. So we played midfield together. It was kind of cute. Um, the three of us, but it was somewhere we could pick each other up, kind of dust each other off and be like, all right, like, yeah, that was bad, but there's
Right.
going to be more passes in the game, or you can take on more defenders after this. So letting people in, it's hard. I don't mean to say that it's easy, but it's a it's something, sometimes the next step that needs to be taken.
I love that you said that because, I love to give, the listeners something tangible. And one of the things that I struggled with, I know so many athletes struggle with, is losing the love of the game, losing the fun, losing, like you said, it was your safe place. And, that's a tangible point you just gave them. Like, if you're someone in that boat, let somebody in, talk to them about it, see if that helps alleviate that struggle that you're dealing with. Just, you know, you never know if you don't try. So just talk to people about it.
Yeah. And like I mentioned before, it's definitely hard and you don't want to admit that something's not quite right, or um, put on that front that maybe you're not as strong as like you pertain to be. But I think especially when you deal with injuries or mental health, you're fighting your own mind, and that's something that makes you so strong, because you wake up every day, you take it on, and you fight a battle that nobody really knows about. Um, and I think that makes you stronger than you realize. And then letting people in, it took me forever to accept that asking for help is a sign of strength,
Yep.
but it really is. Showing that vulnerability is something that I wish was more accepted. But I think just by continuing a conversation about it, hopefully one day we can get there.
Hopefully. Um, so what kind of, I mean, this is something I think a lot of people I talk to with is, freshman year is hard.
Mhm.
And then it seems like the next 3 years, they just kind of get through, they just kind of go through the motions. But I mean, it seems on paper like you ended up happy and you ended up having all these accolades and academic all-american, like it seemed like things went well. So what did those next 3 years actually look like for you? Were they all good?
They were interesting. I definitely dealt still with being a perfectionist. I think getting diagnosed with just mental health disorders my freshman year helped me kind of tackle the next steps and figure out how I was going to cope and how I was going to get through it. Um, I did maintain a 4.0 as a double major, which is something that I'm still super proud of, because I know it was not easy. Academic All American is by far my favorite thing that I was awarded. Just it, I can't even put into words. Like, it was just a super cool thing to be honored with something that recognized my on the field and off the field academic achievements. But there was a lot, like, I kept filling my plate and I would say yes to things. I often call myself a yes girl because I don't do well at setting boundaries and saying no. So I worked as editor in chief of the student newspaper, which was one of the best decisions I did make my college career. I was able to prompt change on campus through writing, and because I'm quieter, writing was something that I found such peace in because I was able to express myself. And on the field, I used to express myself, but when that was kind of something that I had lost briefly, it was good to have another outlet. But yeah, I kept saying yes, and kind of overfilled my days. Being a student athlete is hard enough. And then I was like, oh, sure, I'll teach a psych class, or oh, sure, I'll be a first year peer mentor. And I think they helped me grow, and they helped me learn, but I didn't leave time for myself. And now I'm still in a point in my kind of growing journey here where I will physically write down in my planner that it's like, okay, you're taking an hour today
Right.
to show yourself self-care because I'm such like a go, go, go person that like crossing, like having a to-do list and like physically crossing it off is what gets me to do it. So I'm hoping one day that becomes something that's just like second nature. But I don't regret my college experience at all. I think I had some great opportunities. I made great friends. I was able to play the game that I love. And it's something that was so hard. I mean, there was a lot of sleepless nights. There was a lot of tears. But on the other side of that, I think I came out stronger just because
Right.
um waking up every day fighting my own anxiety, fighting the sadness. It was just like now I know that I can do it. And I remember I was writing the other day just because that's like I said something that I find such peace in, but where the biggest thing that I learned through playing college soccer was just that I could overcome, whether that was an injury, um, whether that was the anxiety or depression, that it was, I could fight and I could fight my own mind. I could fight whatever was going on the field, and that I could come out on top. And I think that was a lesson that it took me too long to learn. But I now have that reassurance in myself that I can do it. And it's such a like now I'm like it's such a simple phrase to say I can do it, but I think for myself it holds so much power.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Something you said that I I oftentimes think about myself is fight your own mind. And I'm just curious your thoughts on this because with like I was diagnosed with depression anxiety. I know so many people are. And then there's times where we just kind of throw around those terms and it's I'm sad, but instead of saying I'm sad, I'm having a bad day, we say I'm depressed. But I'm just kind of curious your thoughts because sometimes I think to myself, like fighting, like it is all in my head. Like obviously, like when there are true mental health concerns, there's serotonin, like imbalances, chemical imbalances, like there is something going on. But I think as athletes, we, innately just want to be strong and we want to, like you said, fight things off that aren't good for us. And, I get torn with this whole battle of am I just being dramatic? Do I need to suck it up? Is it just in my head and I'm actually okay? And then no, there's really something wrong with me. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was something that I went through the same thing. And I think still to this day, I go through the same thing where it's like, am I just being extra? Like, is it really not that big a deal? Or is it something that's serious? Or something that's like you mentioned, a chemical imbalance. And when I double majored in communications and psychology, and in my psych classes, I think it was in child development, they talked about those chemical imbalances and neurotransmitters, and I don't remember it exactly, but I remember just feeling so relieved that I was like, there is something like actually going on. That I was like, it's not like, yes, it's in my head, but there's a reason for it and it's not my fault. Um, but yeah, to this day, I'm still like, oh, maybe I'm just being dramatic.
Mm.
And when people put like labels on it like that, where they like say, oh, you're just being dramatic, like it's okay. I think the language does matter and kind of just throwing around the terms when maybe you are just like upset, but saying you're depressed, like it does play or it does make a difference there. But yeah, I it's still just like I'm like, okay, what's going on? But I I think it's important to learn that whatever you're feeling is valid because it's your feelings and no one can take that away from you. So if you are having a bad day and you're upset or you're frustrated or you're anxious, it's important to honor those feelings and take the next steps to kind of alleviate them in a healthy way. And whether that's like listening to music or I don't know, I'm a big advocate in like blasting some music in the car and like rolling the windows down and
Uh-huh.
just having yourself like a little moment. But doing whatever kind of alleviates that and makes and puts a smile on your face to make you feel safe again and centered is super important.
Right. I was also a psych major, and I think part of what attracted me to it was, like, I was always surrounded by people who got it, like, I didn't have to explain it. They just also felt the same way.
Yeah. No, I remember just yeah, in my psych classes, there was such, like, a safety that I was like, "Alright, like, we're studying the same thing, like, they're not gonna question anything, and if anything, they have the explanation and the knowledge that it's just, like, not just in my head, but that it's a real like, it's a real thing."
Right, right. So I wanna talk about your blog because I'm super intrigued by it. Um, and I can tell that you were in the newspaper as chief editor because you write very pretty. Um You're welcome. Um, but I specifically want to talk about the before it's too late, and I'll tag it, like, if you're okay with that, I'll tag
Yeah.
it in the podcast notes just so people can like read the whole thing. Um, and before we get into it, I want to talk about the Instagram post about the little snippet of it, and I want to have you read that. Before we get into that, I want to talk about some of these stats that you reported because they're very interesting, and I think I just love like when I'm listening to podcasts or things, I like tangible things. I like to hear things and I like to have stats in front of me. So I want to just kind of read these for people to have. So, researchers found that 25% of student athletes reported severe enough mental health concerns to be clinically relevant. That is 1 in 4 people. That's insane. That
Yeah,
means if you're
considering
eating lunch with 3 of your teammates, one of you has serious mental health concerns.
yeah.
That's in itself says enough, I think. But we will go onward. An NCAA survey showed that over 30% of athletes had felt uncontrollably overwhelmed. And in 2013, the NCAA declared mental health the number 1 health and safety concern in student athletes.
I remember reading that and just because like you mentioned, I like having, like, the tangible things and just, like, I think numbers really can resonate and put and just, like, really stick with someone, and I remember reading that, and that could change just because
Right.
that survey was so long ago, um, but I remember reading that and just being so alarmed that I was like, "That's a significant amount," and that's only the student athletes that felt comfortable kind of
Yep.
being vulnerable. And I think at some level, every student athlete and just every person in general has days where they feel overwhelmed, just some probably more than others. But I was just so like taken aback that there was that many that just had felt that way. And not that I want to say I was relieved, but I was, I guess, relieved is the best way
Yeah,
to.
there's strength in numbers. There's strength
Yeah.
in knowing that you're not the only one. And although these stats are just percentages and numbers, it makes you feel comforted that it's a real thing that people are going through.
Yeah, and I was glad to see that the NCAA recognized that as something that student athletes experience, just because they have power to make a difference. So I think recognizing it is a good first step.
It is. But do they do it enough? I'm not sure about that. This next
Yeah,
one.
I'm not sure either, but
um
talk for
so
another day.
and then the last one I want to talk about is in 2019, the NCAA voted to have the Power Five conferences make mental health services available. And as an ex student athlete from one of the Power Fives, I sure we had sports psychologists, loved our sports psychologists. it is so hard for student athletes to get an appointment when you have 2 sports psychologists for hundreds
Girl.
of student athletes. Do you know how hard it is for people? I had a standing appointment, so I walked on in. I didn't have a problem with it. But the people who weren't so early on the boat and didn't realize when it first became a thing that it was okay to go see someone, it was impossible for people to get appointments. My other point I have about this, because I could go on for hours about this, is we talk about breaking the stigma. And I understand that not everyone feels comfortable with other people knowing that they are going to see a sports psychologist. But I was so baffled that there was a waiting room across, so like on one end of this long hallway is a waiting room, and then like you have to go through this like little hallway, and then there's the offices. So people didn't know you were going, you had to go wait in the waiting room, and then they came and got you, and you like snuck through so nobody saw you. And like I get the privacy, I get some people don't want others to know, but how are we supposed to break the stigma if
If
we're
it's
not truly being authentic and we're hiding it? We're sneaking around like we're like 4-year-olds playing hide and go seek.
missing.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, no, and I remember when I would go on campus because I played at a D3 school, so we didn't have sports psychologists, and I don't know if like the level of competition mattered or just resources. Like I'm not sure the reasoning.
Mhm.
Um, but I remember going on to the campus counseling center and doing kind of the same thing. So where I was just like run into class, or like when I broke my foot and was in a cast, I made my roommate drive me. So it wasn't, I had a bright yellow cast. So I was like, people know me, like you have to drive me. Um, but I think getting out of college, and I truly wish now that when I was in college that I was more just like open about it, because I do wish that I could have been someone that was more there for my teammates and just that reassurance that's like, hey, on paper everything looks fine, but like you flip that paper and my mind is chaotic, and it's okay to need that help, and you don't have to be ashamed of it because it's something that happens to more than we realize. But I know exactly, I fell into that where I was like hustling to the counseling center, or like making sure I didn't know anybody, or if I did, taking an alternate route because I
Yep.
was like, they don't need to know. um so I fell into that, but like I totally understand like your point though,
Great, that's okay though.
it's
Like,
important to just be like, yeah, I'm getting help,
right,
and
and
yes it's okay.
like, and I honestly do think that mental health is becoming more of a hot topic. People are caring more, we're talking about it more. But I mean, that was only last year. And I, I had teammates who, like, I would say my team, we pretty openly, like, we knew who was going and who wasn't going. Like, it was a safe place. We felt comfortable sharing. But in a lot of cases, I think especially with, like, male teams, like, it is such an embarrassment for them to be going, and they're so like, I know my husband now, he went because he was hurt, like, all 4 years that he played too, and he went, and he was pretty open with it, but still, like, he would say, like, the guys are joking about it, and, like, if the sports site comes and does, like, a session with your team, like, I don't know, a bunch of weird things. Another thing, I'm rambling, but I remember that if you saw, like, when you first had a session with the sports psych, they would say, like, hey, just want to let you know, like, if we see each other, like, around campus or in public, I won't say hi to you. I'll only wave if you wave to me first. Like, I guess I'm trying to play devil's advocate. I get it, like, privacy.
Yeah, it's a hard, it gets a fine line, but I remember being told the same thing. And Frostburg is a small town that, I mean, I saw my therapist at the grocery store, and I remember being like having that internal like turmoil where I was like, do I say hi? Like, am I breaking my own confidentiality? Like, but it's in the same boat. It's like I know them, they know a lot about me. So like yeah, it's definitely a fine line because you have like HIPAA and all that
Right,
stuff.
right.
But it's also like you know them, you trust them, so there should be this level of comfort. So yeah, I totally get it. And I don't know how to like find that
Well,
balance.
it's like if I'm at the grocery store and I see my family doctor. I'm gonna say hi. You know, it's like the same thing.
Mhm.
What are the resources like? Or, did they evolve? Did you guys end up getting a sports psych?
I don't know about now. I was in a unique situation because we competed in Division 3 my freshman, sophomore, and junior year, and then we transitioned to Division 2 my senior year. So I only competed D2 one year. So I'm not sure what resources like now exist. I We didn't have a sports psych on campus or like just for sports teams, and we didn't have one like within the campus counseling center.
Mhm.
I actually wrote an article my junior year on our campus counseling center just because there were some like interesting things going on with it. And it ended up prompting a partnership with the local hospital that's actually partnered with UPMC to kind of have a relationship with their psychologists, which
Nice.
I thought was pretty cool. Just to get good qualified psychologists on campus that were still kind of related to the community. But I don't know what resources now exist. I hope that one day they do move to incorporate a sports psychologist at some point, or someone that is designated to athletes and maybe has more of a background in that, just because there's such unique things that athletes do deal with that maybe just a general student doesn't. Um, but I'm not sure. I can hope, but when I was there, there wasn't one.
I don't quite think it's fair how the slower you get down, how drastic it changes. And that's coming from someone who's been at the top. Like I was spoiled, and I think it's great that these big athletes, these big schools get to have all those great resources, but the lower D2, D3, even smaller D1, they're still athletes. They still are achieving their dream of playing a college sport.
Yeah.
Like, why is the research? I get funding, whatever. There's always a way. The NCAA makes millions and millions and millions of dollars. There's always a way to have
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah, I don't know how they're allocated, but I appreciate hearing that from like you mentioned, someone who did play at a Division 1 level. Just I never played at a D1 level. I don't honestly know if I would have been able to handle the pressure. Um, just because I do think there's probably more pressure competing at that level than there's pressure at the D3 level. You're still representing your school.
Right.
You're still a student athlete who has to perform at your best all the time, like in the classroom, on the field or in the pool or whatever your sport may be. Um, but yeah, when I saw like you mentioned before, the stat that I think it was the Power Five, and I was like, that's a great first step, but what about the rest of them?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't take away the mental health concerns that, like you mentioned, student athletes at a D2 or D3 level are facing, or even smaller D1s. That yes, it's a good first step. And yes, the student athletes are probably more well known and like that whole thing just with media attention. And that's a whole nother ball game. But it's still you're still kind of excluding so many other student athletes.
I have one more point then. You just hit on something with media attention. Like, I think when we think of, like, let's say Division 1, high Division 1, we're talking ACC. There is so much media attention. Even like my soccer team, like they're very prominent on social media. They're always posting pictures and things. And that may seem like that would be a lot of pressure, and that would add stakes, that would add pressure, which in then return could help, hindrance your mental health, which in then return would cause for the need for more resources. But again, playing devil's advocate, I think for athletes who play at these smaller level, not ever getting that recognition on like social media and the media, I think that is equally as hard because when you're working your butt off, you're practicing just as much, and you're never seeing that like tangible reward for others to notice how hard you're working. That would definitely add some wear and tear.
It because yeah, like you mentioned, getting that recognition for your hard work means the world. And I was fortunate enough to be honored with different accolades, that I know how much it meant to me for others to see that, whether that be my teammates or the conference or whatever it was. And I know when I was in college, I felt almost guilty for receiving these awards because I couldn't kind of rejoice in them because I was struggling with so many other things that now I look back and I'm like, dang, like you go girl, like that was some awesome stuff. But I can't imagine like just some of these student athletes that practice day in, day out, go to extra practices with their coaches or spend extra time in the weight room, um, and not get kind of their moment
Your moment.
of and I think that's so significant. That's such a good point that getting just that recognition that, hey, like you are doing a good job. We see you, we hear you, is something that's definitely not enough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just like something as dumb as like a birthday shout out, like on Instagram. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah,
seems so minuscule to someone, but having like your team's account post you for the day, just a picture of you for the day, it goes really far. I think it does.
yeah. It definitely does. Where it's just like you get your pat on the back. You're. I mean, it shows that your team's proud that you're a member.
Yep.
They recognize your contributions, and yeah, no, that's such a good point.
Good content. I love this. Okay, so I want to talk about your post that went viral because
I feel
I
so great.
I was literally like scrolling on my stories on Instagram and I see all these Notre Dame athletes. I'm like, wait a minute, how do they know Gwen? How do they know Gwen? And
How do
kept
they
coming.
know?
They kept coming, and I was like, oh wait, this girl went viral. So first, do you have the post? Can you read it? Because it'll take a minute, I know, for you to read it, but I think it's so crucial and important. So I kind of just want to have you read that and then we can kind of talk about your whole viral moment.
Okay, yeah, I can pull it up. Where is it? There we go. Alrighty. So we only hear of student athlete mental health after it's too late. Nobody knew the secret struggles of Maddie Holleran, a University of Pennsylvania Division I runner who died of suicide. Morgan Rogers, a D1 lacrosse player at Duke, battled darkness on her own. Austin Wyrick and Evan Hansen, both football players, died by suicide once it got too hard to hide. Bryce Gowdy also died by suicide and was a Division I football commit. Washington State quarterback Tyler Helinski died by suicide, and now Katie Myers, Stanford's talented goalkeeper. The list unfortunately goes on. Too often, student athlete mental health is overlooked. Student athletes have support systems in their coaches, trainers, professors, teammates, and beyond. They're supposed to be living the dream. No one sees the amount of pressure and the overscheduled days an athlete is facing. Between the classes, practices, conditionings, then socializing, studying, sleeping, and eating, there's practically no time. Add on the fact that you're expected to represent your school at the highest level. The high expectations lead to a low tolerance for failure. Depression so easily gets masked in perfectionism. It gets hidden in outward happiness. You're supposed to be mentally tough and you're expected to suck it up and take it. There's this stigma of embarrassment and shame surrounding mental health. Your world is turned against you. You feel like a letdown, a disappointment, a failure, even. You live in a facade of perfection when inside your world is crumbling. You don't want to be rejected or to be treated like you're weak. You don't want to lose your starting spot or worse, your scholarship. I get it because I experienced it myself. My plate was packed in college. The pressure to be perfect was overwhelming. I hid my mental health concerns behind a smile and added more to my plate to continue to prove I was okay. It's scary to battle against your own mind. I lived two lives. I had a 4.0, was editor of our student newspaper, an academic All-American, and an NCAA Sportswoman of the Year nominee. But on the other side of that paper was a side I wanted no one to see. There's empathy for a torn ACL or a concussion, but when it comes to mental health, it's lacking. While having sports psychologists present for student athletes would be phenomenal, it can start with supporting vulnerability. It can start by removing the label of crazy. It can start with being supportive of the person first, then the student, then the athlete.
So clearly, as you guys can hear, she's very good at writing. And
Oh, thank you.
you hit on a bunch of things that I felt, I know others felt. And like I said, like I literally saw so many people on my Instagram reposting it because it's so relatable and it's true. That's how most student athletes I mean, I guess I'm generalizing, but that's how a lot of student athletes feel. Like we're living two lives. We go to practice, we go to class, and we have this one face on. We go home and it's a different face. And that's just the sad reality of how things have been for however many years now.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt like I was like, I experienced it and I was like, I went to this like small D3 school, Western Maryland, and I was like, and I felt this way. Um, and for whatever reason, I was kind of I wrote it after Katie Meyer's passing, just because I was like, I need this outlet, like this
Mhm.
happened yet again, and the conversation needs to continue this time. It can't be something that we talk about for a month and then like quote unquote move on. And I was like, this we can't. We've already lost too many. It's like we need to just keep talking about it until some kind of tangible change is made. Um and I was talking about it with my best friend and I kind of sent her a snippet and I was like, I'm considering posting this. And she does this thing where she goes, do it, you won't. Because she knows that like I will. And I am still in such awe and just so grateful for the response it received. In one sense, it was kind of heartbreaking because I was like, so many student athletes are relating to this. And I don't want anybody to have to feel the way that I felt. And then, like you mentioned before, there is this power in numbers that I was like, okay, I'm not the only one. And maybe together is how we create this change. Maybe together is how we're able to tackle these issues and just support one another in creating this culture of vulnerability. But I mean, I'm so grateful for it. It is one of the craziest things that has ever happened. And I mean, to this day, like it's still getting likes and I'll wake up and I'm like,
I'll say
oh
you
my
you hit the likes. No one can see how many likes you got.
yeah, I didn't I didn't even mean to do that. I think that's just how my settings were. But there's 153,000 plus some. Yeah,
Wow.
maybe
That's
100
crazy.
less.
That's
I got
crazy.
it. I mean, I for someone who likes words and like I'm a nerd and like words, but I can't put words to it because it's just I literally like one night was just like this is something that I'm passionate about. I'm ready to kind of like share my experiences, share my story. Because I almost felt like it had to be done and I'm in a place now where I'm comfortable doing so because I have done some of the work to heal and to kind of grow and it's just wild. It's like beyond my craziest dreams.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's cool to be recognized for something that people would seem as a weakness sometimes. I think that is what's really cool is because you were being vulnerable and it got rewarded in a way.
Yeah, no, for sure. There was like that reassurance that it's like one, you did the right thing by posting, and two, um, like you said, it was just like reassurance that it's just yeah, like vulnerability is supported. And I think we just have to continue to create a place where it is supported.
That's gonna be the title of the episode. Vulnerability is supported. I love when people say something and I'm like, that's it.
Yeah, good.
um, so actually you touched on something I have written down is I feel like when something tragic happens in our community, like as our community, I'm saying like student athletes, something tragic happens, people get on their phones and they'll repost it. They'll post a little Instagram story. And for instance, Katie Meyer, I feel like it was a big deal for a few days. And what I think we see a lot of times is it just kind of poof, people stop caring, people stop posting, people stop talking about it. I don't know if you've listened to the episode, but I had on Tyler Hilinski's parents and
Mhm.
they, like it broke my heart to listen to them talk because they've created this foundation and they do so many amazing things. But is Tyler's name still brought up? Is it still a thing where we're bringing awareness so that that doesn't happen to more Tylers. It doesn't happen to more student athletes. And like your blog says, like it's still happening. It just happened. And it's something that we need to just do more than post on our Instagram stories. We have to take action. We have to like bring it up, talk about it. We need to discuss it with, higher people, say like, why does this keep happening to our student athletes? Like what is going on? So I think, what is your take on how we continue to bring awareness so it's not just something that we post about for a day and then it becomes, for lack of better terms, irrelevant? Because Katie, what happened to Katie is happening to people everywhere, to student athletes everywhere. It's just not being documented. They're not a Stanford student athlete.
There was just my brother actually shared it with me this morning. Of Yeah, someone who played it. I don't remember what it stands for, but I think a school in New York um just died by suicide, a lacrosse player. And I was so taken aback by it because I was like you mentioned, it just keeps
Yeah.
happening, that it's just like that's this like epidemic. I wish honestly I had all the right answers just to make it go away. I think mental health will always be a thing. I think being a student athlete, you're going to face those pressures, and that's the world, like you grew up doing that. But I think when you get to college, it's just this different level.
Mhm.
I do think having resources in place, whether that be maybe more than two sports psychologists to reach the number of athletes that are at your school, to make sure that there's not these long waiting lists, or that I know I had a teammate who was basically told that she was like, "Oh, well, we can see you in like 3 months." And I was like, "You can't." And that was on our on campus counseling center. And I was just like, "We can't have this." And I was like, "We can't have this for student athletes. We can't have this for anybody." Um, because who knows what's going to happen in those 3 months. That like mental health is something that just needs like you. And when you ask for that help, it's important that you receive it because you've already taken your first step.
Right.
But I think my biggest thing is just having teams, both male and female, because I can't imagine just like being like there's so many stereotypes that guys are strong and guys are supposed to be dominant and like all this, that it's just like being anxious or depressed, that it's just like there needs to not. I wish you could just like remove a stigma and be like, all right, like you're done. I
Yeah.
know that's not how it works, but I think it just starts with supporting vulnerability, and recognizing that that's hard and it takes strength to do that, and being there for your friends when they do open up. I wish there was a right answer. I
Mhm.
wish I had the right answers, and like NCAA's money to just be like, here you go. But I think it starts, yeah, with supporting vulnerability and removing like labels that you're not crazy, you're not weak, you're not an embarrassment or a failure or anything. That you're strong, and you waking up every day to fight it and you overcoming it day by day is incredible. And I think it needs to be recognized how hard that is sometimes. And like you mentioned, it can start with like a post on your birthday
Right.
on Instagram where you recognize just the existence of this student athlete on your team that's representing your school, that's putting in the hard work day in and day out. Because little things go a long way. Making sure that we just create this culture where listening comes first, and where we're like, yes, we're a student athlete, but at the core of all that, you're a person.
Right.
And you can't have this like optimized performance at your sport and in the classroom if you're not taking care of that person. And just like positive coping skills, and having like, I think it was my psychiatrist who, I hate when she said it, but she would say, "Be comfortable with the uncomfortable." And I mean, I hated it, and now it finally, like, resonates with me, and I'm like, "Alright, that's how like, that's where growth happens."
Yeah.
But I think being comfortable with the uncomfortable conversations and admitting that there is this problem, and recognizing that it's happening, because that's a step, that it's just like we can't like sweep it under the rug, or
Yeah.
else it's just going to continue. But I think it's also continuing the conversation. Sorry, I'm on like a tangent now.
Go off.
But continuing the conversation and kind of calling on the people that have the capabilities of truly enacting change. And I mean, I follow oh my gosh, I'm gonna blank Victoria Garrick on TikTok,
Yeah.
um, and now Instagram and like any social platform that she's on.
Mhm.
But like there are student athletes now, and what you're doing now, and kind of calling on people to be proud of their scars and be proud of what they've overcome. But I think it's just calling on like having those hard conversations and calling on the people that can create that change, um and continuously doing it, not doing it after something tragic happens, but it's just on your typical like Wednesday, it's like, hey, we didn't forget about this, like we
Right.
need help, you've recognized it as a problem, what are you doing to fix it?
Yep. And I want to do I feel like I try to do my part whenever I feel like opportunity's there. So I want to drop the suicide hotline number just because I know I did a few episodes back, but if someone needs it, you need to call. Do not hesitate. Like your life is so valued. So it's 1-800-273-8255, 1-800-273-8255. And I think, with, some of those athletes you mentioned in your post who have died by suicide, it doesn't seem like they're struggling. On the outside, they're really good at putting that mask on. I'm sure you've read What Made Maddie Run, um, Tyler's story, Katie's story. Everyone says there were no signs. There was nothing leading in the direction of them harming themselves. And then it happens. So even if it seems like someone has the entire world put together in front of them, check in on them. It literally takes no money, 5 minutes of your life to be kind and just ask how someone's doing. It literally can be as simple as that, showing you care about somebody other than yourself.
Yeah, just ask, yeah, are you okay, are you having a good day? Like I know my best friend, still to this day I'll be like, okay, like the little things, if I'm going through just like or having a tough day, and she's like, okay, did you eat today, did you, like, let's make sure you go to bed early, and the little things where it's like, okay, they care,
Yep.
and showing that, and just listening. Half the time the best thing you can do is be a safe place, that someone can go to and listen, because when their voice is heard and their presence is acknowledged, that could honestly change their world.
Mhm. My last question. I think people would appreciate hearing, how do you be so vulnerable on social media? How do you post the other side that you don't always want people to see? Because I think a lot of times people struggling with mental health will have, they want to share it, but they're nervous. They're afraid it's going to be embarrassing. People might judge them. Their coaches might hold it against them. What advice would you give to someone who wants to be more vocal about what they're going through, but they're kind of nervous? Because I know you have had success with opening up and talking about how you're feeling on social media.
Yeah, there's I like to say now that scars prove that you're stronger than whatever tried to hurt you.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of have learned to take that to heart, because in my case it has proven to be that way. Um and I wanted other people to not feel alone. I know that I felt so alone and just lonely, and like I mean that I felt like my world was just crumbling, that if I kind of adapted a mentality that like if my story or my post or my caption or whatever it may be can reach one other person to know that they're not alone, and that my social media can be a safe place for them. um eh, I can't put words to it, it's just something that's so important to me. I can say it's not super easy, because it was just I'm not used to being that vulnerable, I'm used to kind of putting on like the smile and kind of rocking with it. But I think it's important in continuing the conversation and adapting the mentality that vulnerability is a good thing. And that's how we can care for ourselves, care for others. Um, and I just kind of I want to practice what I preach. That if I'm going to say vulnerability is important, I want to prove that. And it's definitely been I've been reassured by the response that I've been fortunate enough to receive, that and student athletes are kind of in the same boat, and that I truly think together is how we prompt this change. But yeah, it's honestly just to make sure other people don't feel how I felt, and that opening up is a way that we can connect with one another, and just I truly think together we're so powerful.
Right. I think, even like I think I put on like a pretty confident face, like with stronger scars, and I try to, make not I don't glamorize it because I don't I mean, like I'm a very real person, but I post things and it's usually in a light that's like the positive side of going through something hard, if that makes sense. But sometimes, when I'm posting something, I feel like, is anyone listening? And it's really hard and it can be discouraging to post and post and post, not receive as many likes or views as you want. And it can be really discouraging to feel like you're just talking to a wall, but you have to do it anyways sometimes. You have to put it out there in case it does reach that one person who needs to hear it. And that's kind of what I remind myself. But like, even like, people say like, "Oh, you seem so confident." Like, I just did an episode on self-confidence. Like, it's not always what it seems. That's just at the end of the day, like people make things seem better than they are. Everyone does.
Yeah, and I think that's just how our world has kind of crafted us to be, where you don't want to show those sides, but I think it's so important to show those sides. You're going to reach more people than you know. And maybe that, I mean, I had someone in my like kind of say they didn't want to necessarily like repost what I had posted, but they wanted me to know that it touched them, that it reached them. And I wanted to just reassure them that, like, you even reaching out to me, some total stranger, takes a step of courage.
Right.
That you acknowledging that, or and even you like laying in your bed scrolling on Instagram and taking a moment to read a caption that's maybe just the realities behind whatever the post is or whatever the reality is behind that smile is. And you taking that moment to even like it and be like, oh my gosh, I like you've done your job sharing your story. You've reached someone. They've they maybe haven't verbally acknowledged you, but I guarantee that somebody that reads it feels unfortunately feels the same way.
Right. Yeah. Well, those are all the questions I have. Is there anything that we didn't talk about you want to talk about, or anything you want to kind of bring the conversation to? Kind of just the floor is yours if you want it.
Uh, no, I just appreciate the opportunity to continue the conversation. It's something that is so near and dear to my heart, and I am beyond thankful for this opportunity, for my post, for the student athletes like yourself, that are doing what they can to be a safe place to continue this conversation and to spark the change that so desperately needs to be made.
Right. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Gwen, for coming on. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I feel like we had a really good conversation. Like, I think we said some things that needed to be said. I think people getting to hear your side of things kind of just, I think word of mouth, like, it goes a long way.
It definitely does.
So, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you.